medieval painters really ruined it for us. We've got this idea that cherubim, actually pronounced cherubim, are these chubby little babies with wings flying around with bows and arrows, especially around Valentine's Day. Nothing could be further from the truth. Welcome, I'm Derek Gilbert in the Skywatch Studios, and with us today is a researcher and author. We're talking about his new book, Cherubim, Chariots, Exploring the Extra-Dimensional Hypothesis. He's going to be a guest on an upcoming episode of Skywatch TV, and we're proud to welcome Josh Peck to the studio. Josh?
Oh, well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's definitely a blessing, and I'm very excited to talk about this.
Well, this is a fascinating topic, and you are really an out-of-the-box thinker, which is something that I really appreciate. The topic of the book, the cherubim, one of the classes of angels. What do we know about the cherubim from the Bible?
Well, we know that based on their appearance, they seem to be an amalgamation between a human-type appearance and animal-type appearance. But it seems like they're more classified based on their job, which is to protect. The first inkling we get of that is in the book of Genesis. After the fall, the cherubim came in to help protect the way, so Adam and Eve couldn't get in there. So that's the first time that we really see the cherubim. We don't get much of a physical description there, but we do get the job, what their job is. Later on, we get more physical descriptions, especially in the book of Ezekiel, which is fascinating.
Well, we'll talk about that in another update here in a couple of days, because Ezekiel's wheel is one that really gets the ancient astronaut crowd really excited. But in terms of the cherubim themselves, you mentioned the kind of hybrid human animal appearance. Just touch on that briefly.
Sure. Well, we see that in biblical descriptions, but we also see it even in ancient artwork, and we see that in the surrounding nations, particularly what's known as the Lamassu and the Shadu. The way that they look, they have animal bodies and human heads, usually of a lion or a bull, and even those were erected to guard the palace doorways. So we see that that same purpose there. Even the surrounding nations understood what these things were and understood their purpose. So it stands to reason, I believe, that they actually witnessed these things firsthand. And there's even some ancient inscriptions on some of those palaces that seem to say that they actually witnessed these things.
So we're talking about these other ancient nations around the ancient Hebrews,
yes,
like Assyria, Babylon,
yep,
the Medo-Persians, the Syrians, and so forth. All of these, even the Egyptian. Well, the Sphinx,
yeah,
lion's body with a human head.
Absolutely, and it's that same type of description. And so it's not. I don't believe it's something that they just made up one day and all got together and decided, well, this is going to be our thing, because it's so many different nations. I believe that they were acting from firsthand encounters with these things, and
okay,
there are ancient texts that talk about that. So I get into that in the book.
Now you talk about the role of the cherubim and their purpose was to protect or to guard things. Where do we see that in the Bible?
Well, we particularly see that in the temple, in Solomon's temple. It gives a description there, and that's actually the first, I believe it's in Kings, that's the first just actual physical description that we get of it. It's still vague, though. We don't really get the actual physical description until later on in Ezekiel, and then even later on into that in Revelation talks about them too. And they stand around the throne of God. So there seems to be a guarding or protecting kind of thing there. I think, God, what does he need protection for? It's more of a status kind of thing. But it's still really interesting that same job is still there for them as well.
But we also see the cherubim referred to in the book of Genesis.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. In the garden, we talked about that. And what's interesting too is it says that they had this flaming sword to guard the way. This kind of gets into my other book, but there's I heard years ago a teaching by Chuck Missler that talked about how that sword may have split the dimensions.
Yes.
Loved it. And so I wanted to see if there was anything to that. And I looked into it as much as I can. And when you really get into the Hebrew, it seems to say that. So I talk a lot about that in the book as well.
So we've got this the cherubims with the flaming sword guarding the entrance to the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. And yet, since we've not been able to perceive the garden here in this dimension, we may be talking about something, an entity that moves between dimensions.
Yeah, they're definitely extra dimensional. And I believe that the garden itself was even extra dimensional. And I say in the book, the reason that, a lot of people have done some amazing research on where the garden might have been located, but the question remains, where is it now? I think it's possible it's still there. We just can't perceive it because it's extra dimensional. So I talk a lot about that in the book, but it's a fascinating topic and one I love researching.
It is, and we'll pick up that topic in our next daily update. Cherubim, Chariots, Josh Peck, exploring the extra dimensional hypothesis. That's our subject this week of Daily Updates. For Skywatch TV, I'm Derek Gilbert.